Welcome to the FarmBits podcast.
FarmBits is proudly produced by the Nebraska Digital Agriculture Team and hosted by students at the University of Nebraska.
The FarmBits podcast comes to you each week to discuss the trends, the realities, and the value of digital agriculture.
Through interviews with experts, producers, and innovators from across the agriculture industry, we hope that you step away from each episode with new practical knowledge of digital agriculture technology. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Open for Business FarmBits collaboration episode. I'm Kelsey Swantek.
And I'm Asia Macon. We are so excited that you are here to join us. This collaboration was formed on the idea of taking the Best of Women in Agriculture's Open for Business series and the Best of the FarmBits podcast and combining it to create a new, informative mini-series.
On this episode, we're joined by Jordyn Bader, co-founder and the director of industry partnerships at Marble Technologies. Marble is developing intelligent automation for the meat processing industry to address the industry's greatest pain point, chronic labor shortages. Marble brings together diverse domain experts, including meat scientists, software engineers, and roboticists to build impactful and customer-focused solutions.
Jordyn has spent her career in ag technology and uses her background in agriculture to bring the voice and perspective of the customer to inform product development. There's some great information coming your way, but we are going to let Jordyn tell you the rest.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Open for Business FarmBits collaboration episode. I'm Kelsey Swantek, the Nebraska Women in Agriculture Spring Intern and a FarmBits co-host.
And I'm Asia Macon, a FarmBits co-host as well. We are so excited you are here to join us. Tonight is a new adventure for all of us, but was formed on the idea of taking the best of Open for Business and the best of the FarmBits podcast and combining it to create a new informative mini-series.
Tonight, we're joined by Jordyn Bader, co-founder and the director of industry partnerships at Marble Technologies. Marble is developing intelligent automation for the meat processing industry to address the industry's greatest pain point, chronic labor shortages.
Marble brings together diverse domain experts, including meat scientists, software engineers, and roboticists to build impactful and customer-focused solutions. Jordyn has spent her career in ag technology and uses her background in agriculture to bring the voice and perspective of the customer to inform product development. We will let Jordyn tell you the rest.
So Jordyn, first of all, thank you for joining us again. We just want to get to know you. So we want to know, just share a little bit about your background, where you're from, your education, and where you're at today.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this collaboration. I'm excited to share more about Marble Technologies and what we're doing to make a difference in the agriculture industry, specifically in the meat industry. So happy to be here tonight. I grew up in production agriculture. I'm from a small town, Ainsworth, Nebraska, located in the north central part of the state. My family has a cow-calf operation, so very much am familiar and ingrained in the meat industry and agricultural production. From there, I went on to study at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I earned both my bachelor's and my master's degree in agricultural economics. And I am proud to be one of the first members of the Engler Entrepreneurship Program there on East Campus at UNL as well. That program was certainly very, very formative and transformational for me and my career. So I credit a lot of where I am today to my experience at the university and especially as part of the Engler program.
Engler is a really good program. I do agree. I'm not a part of it, but I know a lot of really, really good students come out of that. So, and congratulations on being in that first class.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really cool to see it develop and change, and very impressive young students who create businesses while they're in school. So that's great to still be engaged in as an alumni as part of that program. After my time at the university, I went on to work for a company called GrainBridge. GrainBridge was an ag technology company that developed risk management software for farmers and ranchers. So things like budgeting, grain marketing, all of that management could take place there in the software application. So my role at GrainBridge was focused in product development, which really meant being the voice of the customer or being the voice of agricultural producers and understanding what their needs are and helping to communicate those needs to the engineers who are able to actually develop the technology to make sure that the requirements actually help producers make the decisions that they needed to make. So during my time at Grainbridge, I worked with fantastic people several of whom I'm privileged to work with today at Marble as well. So that was a great experience for me and helped me uncover my passion for product development and kind of merging the two worlds of technology and agriculture. Grainbridge went on to be acquired as a joint venture between ADM and Cargill, and I left there in the June of 2020 to pursue what is today Marble with a couple of former colleagues at Grainbridge who I worked with at Grainbridge. And so fast forward to today, Marble has been incorporated now officially for about a year and a half. And I'm one of the co-founders and the director of industry partnerships. And I'm looking forward to chatting more about what we're doing at Marble. On a personal standpoint, I am married to my wonderful husband, John, and we have two young daughters who are almost 4 and 2 years old. So we've got an exciting household most days, keeping everything afloat, but it's very rewarding, and I feel very blessed to be able to work in a career that I find to be very fulfilling while raising two young daughters that I hope I'm setting an example of what women can do in entrepreneurship and in agriculture.
That is really inspiring, and I'm pretty sure that you are a great role model for them, Jordyn. So what exactly is Marble Technologies, and what does it mean when you say intelligent automation, especially when it comes to meat processing?
Yeah. So Marble Technologies is developing what we call intelligent automation, or AI-powered automation for the meat processing industry. So what we mean by that is that we are putting brains on hardware to automate challenging, physically demanding, and repetitive tasks that exist in meat processing today. So as we likely all experienced during COVID-19, there was a large disruption to many supply chains, but particularly in the meat supply chain. And part of the reason is because it's a very labor-intensive process and task for animals and carcasses to be broken down to the food that we eat or purchase at the grocery store, at the restaurant. So Marble was really born out of these pain points and these challenges. We spent a lot of time talking with stakeholders in the agriculture industry, especially in the meat supply chain, to understand what's happened and why are there breakdowns in the supply chain. And really what we came to find is that there is this bottleneck that exists in the middle of the process at meat processing, and there is such a high reliance on manual labor in order to get meat to our tables. A high percentage of the labor required to get an animal from the farm to the table occurs at that stage in meat processing. So when we talk about intelligent automation, one of the challenges of automation in this particular industry is that unlike very consistent, uniform products that you might think about like a Hershey's Kiss or a Peep and other food production, they're all very consistent products, right? They are supposed to be the exact same size every single time. So automation is easier with products that are very uniform and automated because everything is the same, it's consistent. But we know that is not the case in meat manufacturing or meat products. So when we talk about intelligent automation, what we really mean is that there's a degree of intelligence associated with this, and we're able to do that through artificial intelligence, that these tasks that we are working on automating in meat processing have a level of decision-making capacity that it's able to handle the variability that exists not only in meat products, but also in the process that it sees. So by developing this automation that isn't necessarily driven on a very strict set of rules that expects the same thing every single time, we're able to actually adapt to how the automation functions based on the environment and changes in that environment. So one example of that, we are bringing our first product to market this year, and it's focused on automating the sorting and packing of meat products. So today, meat facilities have a high number of people whose sole job is to look for a vacuum sealed piece of meat and place that into a box. So this is really very repetitive. It's not necessarily adding value to the product itself. And there's a huge opportunity to upskill these employees to do something that is higher value to the company, higher skills for them that they can add other than looking for a particular product and placing it into a box. So our first product that we're bringing to market is this automated sorting and packaging. And so using computer vision and artificial intelligence, we're able to identify pieces of meat that are not labeled. And then software is able to direct where that meat is routed and sorted into sorted so it can then be boxed. Pick and place robotic arms certainly are able to pick up those products and place into a box, or even simply by doing the sortation, automating that sorting of various products, individual operators can increase their efficiency by packing more products than just one or two, like what they're doing today. So I guess coming back to answer your question in terms of what is that intelligent automation, it's really putting brains on equipment that are used in manufacturing and meat manufacturing to be able to automate repetitive tasks, even when the environment isn't always the most predictable or the product isn't predictable.
That's really cool. That's yeah, I agree with everything you said. Labor shortages is a huge thing, and then just that repetitive motion is so hard on a person. Even if it's, just cutting a piece of meat, that's hard on a person. So you kind of already answered this, but just to clarify, where is Marble today as a company? You said it's aimed to be out by the end of the year. So are you guys still testing it? Or are you just trying to have your robots ready to go when the orders start coming in, or where are you at on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, we've been incorporated since November of 2020, and we've got a team. We've assembled a fantastic team that combine multiple disciplines. So one very unique thing about the Marble team is that it's bringing together worlds that typically would not intersect or collide. So we bring together meat scientists and folks who have experience in meat operations and meat industry know-how with engineers who have developed both software and hardware technologies in other high-tech industries. So the silver lining of COVID is that we've been able to get talent very interested from other industries, very interested in working in automating meat processing, which otherwise, that I think without COVID or 5 years ago, the sell to recruit talent from places like astronautics or Department of Defense would be more challenging than what we've had. So we've assembled a team of both engineers, meat scientists, and folks who have experience building ag tech startups together. And we are piloting the technology with a couple of beef processing facilities this year, and are prepared to commercialize and start then following those pilots, selling the units following that towards the end of the year. So we are funded through venture capital and private investments. And so we're full scale on this. We've got a team of about 20 people in a variety of capacities working on our team in order to deliver our first product in 2022.
Awesome. That's so exciting. So just to clarify, you are not the processing plant. You are building robots for the processing plants to use.
That's right. Yeah. So Marble itself is, we are not a processing facility. And I would also say that automation isn't just robotics. So a lot of what we do in the technology extends beyond robotic applications. So while robotic arms could certainly be used in this, there's automation that could exist by using things like paddle sorters and sorting arms, as well as eventually some robotic arms do multiple different tasks in the facility. So our core competency really focuses in technology. So that's our bread and butter. That's what we know and what we're very good at developing and building. And that being said, we do work closely with meat processors. So from a product development standpoint, we can't build this technology in a basement, ship it to Nebraska, and assume that that's going to work in a production setting. So the engagement with our customer base is absolutely critical to what we're doing, because we have to be able to test it. We have to understand what their needs are and make sure that the technology we build is really meeting the needs and the pain points that they have for us. So though we are not the processor, we collaborate very closely with them through every stage of development throughout this process.
Awesome. So Jordyn, we actually have a question in the chat from Austin Brown. So Austin says that he is curious to know if there's potentially an incentive for producers that may need to be offered by packers to try to hit a more target carcass weight to better fit the needs of the intelligent automation technology, or are they able to adjust to large variation of carcasses? Similarly, he's thinking about the selection intensity for dairies to breed for uniform udders when using robotic milkers.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So part of the reason our beachhead market, or the first market that we're focused on, is in the beef industry as well as pork, but beef in particular has that variability as you're speaking to, in terms of the genetic variability in terms of size and weight. And that's part of the reason that technology, or automation specifically, has been challenging or slow to be adopted in the beef industry, is because of that very factor of the variability in carcasses. Now, I think technology has come long enough, or it has come far enough in the last few years alone to be able to actually adapt to that variation. So, so to answer the question, I don't think that it is going to be necessary for cattle themselves to be more uniform in order for automation to work, because these improvements to the artificial intelligence, computer vision, is capable to make those adjustments and changes based on variability in size and in shape. But that is a really great point, though, from an entire industry standpoint and perspective, is where can there be, how can technology improve the decisions that producers make upstream? So we have these conversations with stakeholders. It's a really big part of what my day-to-day of what I do at Marble is not only talk to our customers, but talk to stakeholders across the industry of how does the technology that we are developing and building raise all ships across the supply chain. And if we're able to capture better information, how can that be shared with producers so they're making better choices from a breeding standpoint that elevates the value of the carcasses that they're bringing in? So I think that's a fantastic question. And one of the things that really excites me about this technology is the opportunity to benefit the producer at every stage through the process by better information sharing and just having that data be made more available and accessible to them. There's massive amounts of information that can be generated, but isn't necessarily being captured today, and furthermore shared with those producers who want that information of how their cattle are performing or choices that they can make upstream. So to answer the question, I don't think it's necessary for automation to be successful for the product to be more uniform. Does it make it easier? Certainly, it certainly does. But I think that the intelligence components and the ability to adapt to the variability is truly what's needed in order to elevate or go on to the next frontier of automation in the meat processing space.
Right.
Thank you, Austin, for that question. And thank you, Jordyn. That was a great answer.
So Jordyn, though, how did you get the idea that we know today as Marble Technologies? Where did that actually come from?
Sure. Well, again, COVID-19 hit and things, very vivid memories of, the supply chain disruptions that happened. I mentioned the Engler program. I was part of that as a student. I've stayed fairly involved in that program as an alumni. And so Tom Field, the director of the Engler program, has been a great mentor of mine since college. And so throughout COVID, I spent a lot of time just on the phone trying to just connecting with people. And in one of my conversations with Tom, we just started digging into kind of what happened in the supply chain in the meat space, or kind of where are these breakdowns happening, kind of concurrently of having those conversations with, just my relationships of folks in the meat industry. I stayed connected with some of my colleagues who I had worked with at Grainbridge and who are my co-founders as well at Marble. And Marble CEO Shafiq Barber, who was also a co-founder actually of the previous company, Grainbridge, was out at MIT getting his MBA, and his background is in technology. And so several of us had continued to chat about what are some ideas, what's the next business idea that we want to pursue together. And so all of this was kind of happening as COVID was kind of just surfacing and getting started. And so through my conversation with some of my mentors at UNL and in the meat space, we had chatted about, hey, there's challenges that are happening in the meat industry. We know technology, and through his experience at MIT, got to know like a whole new set of talent out there. So we started probing as, do we know people that could help address this problem from a technology standpoint? And from there, we really just started getting introductions to experts in the meat industry. So one introduction would lead to another, and we spent a lot of time on the phone, just asking questions, seeking to understand what the pain points were, what caused some of these challenges in the supply chain, and where is there an opportunity for technology to make a difference and bring impact. So Marble was really born out of COVID in many ways, and a desire from a group of people who know technology and are rooted in agriculture and work to try and combine those two worlds to make a difference in an industry that matters to us. So that's how we got started.
Awesome. So after you built your network, what did your business plan for Marble look like from the start after you started talking to all of the professionals and the producers?
Yeah, great question. So to be honest, we really focused on putting together an executive summary. So like, think of this as like a 3-page business plan to kind of articulate what we were thinking, what our ideas were, and what the opportunity was in front of us, and the solution that we could bring. When we first got started, or that first summer, we were hearing, like there needs to be more processing capacity. And so when we initially started out, we had this, the pitch was about this vision of partnering to actually be a processor, create new processing, next generation processing facilities that are equipped with all of this technology. So that's how we got started. And again, we just continued to get feedback, have introductions to experts, and we are very good at listening and receiving feedback, internalizing that, and making sure that what we do is actually solving the need or addressing the customer's needs. So over time, as we got feedback, that began the business plan and kind of evolved into focusing more on our core competency of the technology. And over time, I think that technology will, even in existing legacy meat processing facilities, generate more processing capacity. And as new facilities are being built, I certainly think that automation will be a very big component to these new meat processing plants that we'll read about that are being announced and raising money for. So it started out with the grand vision to build a new processing facility equipped with the technology, and we pivoted to really focus in more on our core competency of developing the tech.
So from that original business plan, and even today, what were some of your checkpoints or the requirements that you wanted this company to meet specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and maybe this is more from a personal standpoint, I think actually solving a problem is certainly the big number one factor. And I think how we've gotten so much traction so quickly is that the problem is big, it's well known, and it's at a tipping point. So making sure that what we're building is actually addressing a problem is a big checkpoint and a gut check for us always in what we're doing as we vet the products that we're pursuing or developing, making sure that that it actually is meaningful and making an impact to the customer. So that's a big one. For me personally, I have to be drawn to the mission and purpose of what we're doing. And so that's one of the reasons that Marble is easy to wake up and go to work every day. And it's exciting to me because as someone who grew up in production ag, my family and friends raise livestock. So this issue doesn't just affect me as a consumer, but it affects many of my friends and family at the other end of the supply chain when there are disruptions here. So that to me is that it checked the box that this is meaningful and purposeful work to be doing every day. It's a great group of people to work with. And I think the other thing that we look for internally is, what we do, is it scalable? So we want to make sure that we're not developing one project for one customer, but that we are talking to enough people across the industry that what we build is a scalable model, a scalable solution that's needed by multiple facilities, and what we're pursuing, I think, also checks that box.
Awesome. So Jordyn, we have a few questions in the chat. I'm going to start with the first one from Kristen. Kristen wants to know, in what states are the products being piloted? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Marble has 2 locations. We have a group of engineers out of Lincoln, Nebraska, and we've got a group out in Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, rather. We have relationships with a number of facilities, and of course, Nebraska, we've got some strong relationships, and also in the Northeast, where we're pursuing our pilots for our technology.
Awesome. And we have another one from an anonymous attendee. They want to know that how can they invest in companies like yours?
Yeah. Another great question. So for us, it's we have found investors, again, through relationships. From a Nebraska-based standpoint, I think for Nebraska, Invest Nebraska is a great resource, and that's probably where I would start. They have been great champions for us and advocates for what we are working on, and have made fantastic introductions, and they know a lot of people in that space, and not only from an investment standpoint, but also from ag tech startups. So that might be my first stop in terms of who to talk to. Other folks that we've been connected to have been personal relationships through our network. And so I don't know that there's like a place better perhaps than Invest Nebraska to start in terms of having those conversations of how to get connected with startups like Marble.
Speaking of starting up Marble, where did you guys come up with the name Marble?
So the group of us that were on the founding team, we had just some Google folders with some various ideas we were floating around, and so we called this Project Marble, which kind of came from thinking of like marbling of beef. So we included that in our executive summary as we started shipping it around, and people started commenting like, I like this name. So it kind of stuck. It took about 30 seconds, I think, to come up with, and people told us they liked it, so we ran with it.
I love how simple that is, and it becomes such a huge, awesome company like that. That's cool.
So Jordyn, what are some of the advantages and benefits that the Marble system offers?
So Of course, the thing that everyone wants to talk about, especially customers, from an advantage standpoint, is the ability to reduce the amount of labor required to process meat or in a particular department. Sometimes we'll get the question of, are we replacing jobs? And that is not the case whatsoever. These facilities are short 100 to 300 people a day in their staffing. So what they love about what we're doing is that any labor savings that we can achieve in certain areas of the facility, they're able to redeploy or upskill into other high need, high value areas of their facility. So that, of course, is advantage and benefit number one. But beyond that, with additional technology, there's a lot of other areas that can be impacted from a sustainability and efficiency standpoint when you really look at it across multiple domains. So not only labor savings, but improving the job quality. So even those jobs that do exist in meat facilities, by utilizing this type of technology, it should reduce the amount of tasks that lead to repetitive use injury or that are really physically demanding. So not only reducing the overall labor requirements, but making those jobs easier on people's bodies and more ergonomic, which you see a lot of today, which is fantastic that that's been adopted in the industry. With elements such as computer vision and more of the software and data collection, I also anticipate there to be substantial gains around like reduced waste. So for example, can you detect when packages aren't adequately sealed by utilizing cameras? So today, they're able to pick up on that, and it gets, the faulty package gets removed, it goes back up, it gets put back into a package where it gets vacuum sealed. But it's still very manual, and there isn't necessarily any time to figure out what's causing this. Is it a faulty vacuum sealer? So with things even like pattern recognition, this technology should be able to identify where there's issues that need to be addressed sooner to reduce waste and improve quality, and just better insights and information. As I mentioned, there's a lot of information that is generated every day in these facilities, but that either isn't being captured or it's not presented in a way that you can make better decisions with. So long term, I think where there will be the most advantage to this type of technology in any manufacturing, but especially in meat production, is around the information, having more real-time, up-to-date information to make better operational decisions with. So those are a couple of the ones that we know and that we're aiming for in terms of benefits that our system can deliver.
Right. So I'm going to make this next question a little bit harder on you. Your answer cannot be COVID, because that is everyone's answer all of the time. But what was the biggest business shock that you faced? How did you overcome it, and what did you learn from it?
Well, my response would not be COVID, because that's really, we were born out of that disruption. So it's the silver lining of the whole deal, I think. So I think it maybe wasn't so much a shock as somewhat of a surprise, as I think back to, what were the challenges that I anticipated. I think what we've come to learn is that the technology itself isn't necessarily like the most challenging component of this. So, right, there is computer vision technology that exists in other industries that can identify particular products. So we'll sometimes get the question of like, why isn't this being done in meat processing? Truthfully, I think some of the greatest challenge is the environment in which this technology has to live is really where we spend time thinking about that, and engineers solely focused on how do we get cameras to operate in an environment that is cold and it is wet and it is going to get high pressure and hot water every single night. So those are things I think going into it that you don't stop to think about, are what are all of these other constraints outside of like, can the technology actually work? Can I identify a piece of meat based on the muscle that it is, basically? So I think that was something that that was surprising. And as you go into these facilities, you also realize, to the same point in terms of the environment, is these are very tightly packed. There aren't many brand new meat processing plants, so there's not a ton of space. They have optimized the space that they have for the process that they're doing for individuals to conduct this work. So part of the engineering and design process is really making compact solutions that can actually fit in these facilities and in a way that doesn't cause them to, be offline or not operating for a long period of time because they have to gut their entire department in order to fit this in. So that's not our approach at all. We design around these constraints that I think were maybe in some ways surprising to us going into it, of like, okay, really a lot of these challenges come from just the environment in which it has to live in. Just it's cold and wet, and it has to be very compact and be able to be deployed in over a weekend, basically. Okay, we have to be able to get this set up in 2 days. How do we design something that can be implemented in a phased approach? So those are some things that I think, for lack of a better term, have been maybe surprising to me going into it. How we've responded and adapted to that is, when we know those constraints up front, that's certainly helpful to our design, but we've also learned to communicate with customers to really think about, how do I make this as de-risk this for them in a way that they will feel comfortable bringing in this technology, that it in a phased approach. So at times, there's, coming from a software background, it's not challenging to ask a customer or a farmer to like, hey, spend some time on this application and give me some feedback. They have very little risk associated with that. Like, the biggest thing that they have given up is their time. So very little risk if something happens, to a software application. But what we're doing in this industry, as I mentioned before, it requires that collaboration with the customer. So these pilots that we're conducting and that collaboration with the customer is so critical, because replicating a meat production facility is very difficult to do in a lab. So we have to be able to do that testing on site and in these facilities. And this is mission critical stuff to the facility. It's not just, yeah, I'll spend an hour to give you feedback, but the technology is on the production line, and there's higher risk associated with that in comparison to a software application. So those are some things that were new to us, that came from more of that software background. But we've adapted, I think, by just putting different constraints on ourselves and learning to communicate and think about that in a really incremental and phased approach.
Nice. So, Jordyn, we have a question in the chat for you. What do you think the biggest advancement your company has made or will make in terms of packer efficiency?
I think with this first product that we're focused on, it will be in on the labor side of that variable of labor, and being able to redeploy or have the ability to redeploy those operators. So what we hear from our customers is, like, from an efficiency standpoint, is they're slowing down their line speed because there isn't enough people there. They may change the production mix that they're producing. So they'll shift to fewer, less labor intensive cuts to fabricate. So maybe they're not separating as many muscles or they're doing easier cuts basically, but that also tends to reduce the value of them by not processing them quite as much. So that I think will certainly be, at least initially, the biggest gain that we have. And then, as I mentioned before, I think so much of what we will be able to do is provide insights and based off of data for front office decision makers from an operations standpoint, to enable them to have a real-time look at what they've produced. I think their sales team will be able to have more up-to-date information. Their operations team will be able to make decisions on how they want to move people around or what's on the make sheet for that particular day. So I think that over time, that's really going to be where great efficiency gains are made is simply by having more accessible information.
What do you like about working in a startup environment versus a corporate environment? And how can women get involved in ag technology too? That's a really good one.
Awesome. Fantastic question. I was actually just sharing with a friend the other day that my absolute favorite phase of companies generally is very much this early stage startup where it's scrappy, there's hustle, and you wear so many hats because so much there is much to do, but it's fun because there's a lot of different hats that you wear and roles that you play based on what's needed. So I think that's just exciting to me and what I particularly enjoy. To be honest, I don't have a lot of experience in a corporate environment. Maybe the biggest experience I had was being at Grainbridge after it was acquired as a joint venture, though we still really operated somewhat independently. So just to say that I don't know that I have adequate experience in both worlds to really appropriately compare them. But what I love about the startup space is that there is the ability to see the impact and difference that you make. So in every role that I've had, both at Grainbridge and here within Marble, your voice is heard. The entire team is really encouraged to act as an owner and to share input, and everyone is on. Everyone cares. At least my experience has been that the team is really invested in the company overall, and they care about the direction that we're going and want to do everything that they can in order to reach those shared goals within the team. So those are a few things that I love is just that team aspect, the ability to directly see the impact that you're making. And I think it's just exciting and fun because there's something new or something different, and it keeps work really exciting and engaging and really so much growth. I think that I've grown more as a professional in the last 18 months than I have, from the start of my career to when we started Marble. So that's also been a great experience for me personally, as well as a lot of growing continues to happen even being part of the startup team. How women can get involved, that's a fantastic question. I think it goes back to relationships and just making the connections. So for anyone interested or wanting to just understand more about what are the opportunities in technology or in agriculture, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to sit down or have a virtual coffee together and just chat about that. I was just fortunate, honestly, I wasn't particularly planning to work in technology when I was at the university. But it was just through my network and through some people that I knew that I learned of an opportunity at this ag tech company called Grainbridge. And so that's really how that developed and how I came to really enjoy the product development space and living at the intersection of agriculture and software development and engineers. But I would just say reach out to those people who are working in that space and just learn and understand and grow those relationships.
Awesome. So Jordyn, going back to the conversation we had about business shocks, how have you prepared Marble to face the next one?
Yeah, I guess I would just reiterate that we really, I think, break down what we do, or we are always asking ourselves the question, how do we de-risk this as much as possible for the customer? I think one thing we do very well is we listen. And when we ask questions, we're very good at inquiry and customer discovery and asking these questions to seek to understand what those concerns are and then address those. Of course, more on the technical side, we do a lot of testing and iteration and development in terms of those, constraints that we face from an environment standpoint, or those technical risks. So we've got processes that we follow from an engineering standpoint to make sure that we feel really confident and comfortable with the technology and living in its intended environment, even though we don't have a meat processing plant of our own to test in. We certainly replicate it as best we can to test before we actually go into our facilities.
That's awesome. We have another question here. Where is there so much divide between packer profits and the producer? Can you kind of explain how Marble works, how much Marble work might benefit the producers?
Yeah, yep, that's a great question, and I totally understand it, coming from production agriculture. So, I mean, this bottleneck in the industry, which certainly is contributing to, or at least in recent years, contributing to the growing difference in profit between packer and producer, really is coming from some of this bottleneck and constraints of capacity. So Marble, with automation and Marble specifically, we are aimed at reducing that choke point and removing this burden or this pain point in the processing facility. So this is good for producers. We know that when processing capacity decreases, the price that producers receive also decreases. And when capacity goes up, there's more marketing opportunity for livestock producers and operators. So that's where we see there being benefit in the short term, especially, is by relieving this pain point that has substantially contributed to the constraint in capacity on a daily basis.
So what are you most excited about moving forward with Marble itself, and also the automation and robotics in agriculture?
Yeah, I'm most excited to make a meaningful difference in an industry that I care deeply about, and that I've been a part of growing up. So that's what's very exciting to me about Marble is the impact that we can make. The other very exciting thing, just taking a step back and looking at this like at a kind of from a bird's eye view, is there's some interesting stuff happening at the time. I think the timing could not be better for Marble. And while labor shortages have been an issue, not just for meat processing, like agriculture generally is facing labor shortages, but it's particularly acute in meat processing. It's been a long-standing problem, but it's finally come to this tipping point where it's an issue that has to be resolved. To address how are we going to handle this moving forward, these are challenges that have to be resolved, and automation is certainly where people are looking to for that answer. So what excites me too with Marble is just the timing of all of this happening. Is there's never been a better time for what we are doing than there is today. To your point on the packer profits that's contributing to the timing is, if these were very tight margin, low margin years, these may be more challenging conversations to have. But there is an opportunity, at least in this window, for some of these investments to be made now, in order to have more smooth sailing moving forward in terms of future disruptions or events. And you also have money coming into this industry to try and solve these supply chain challenges from both the government making announcements of working to resolve these challenges in the meat supply chain, as well as venture capital firms investing a lot of money in this space. So the timing of all of these things coming together is really exciting. And I never would have imagined that this would be where I am today, even just a few years ago. So that's an exciting piece. From overall automation and robotics in agriculture, I think people like myself or those who have an agricultural background, and Nebraska generally, I think there is so much knowledge and subject matter expertise that exists in this area. And there's so many smart engineers who are removed and don't understand this space. So I think what's exciting, and I think that Marble is doing well, is it's merging these very unique skill sets together that has access to understand these problems and challenges, and to get very talented engineers to actually solve these problems. So from automation and agriculture standpoint, I think there's so much opportunity for the next generation of technology and agriculture generally. And so I would encourage any producer here or anyone who's got that agriculture background to have those conversations with engineers, people who don't understand, because the technologists need you so badly, just as much as you need them. Because the worst thing that can happen is that technology gets built without really understanding the problem. And the only way that problems can be understood is by talking to the people that are experiencing them. So I would just encourage those with an ag background to give that time. If someone's asking for feedback or wanting to understand how things work, that's how great technology that can solve problems gets built, is by talking to the user, talking to the customer.
I absolutely agree with that. We have another question in the chat. Is Marble being challenged by any regulations?
Yeah, great question. So while the meat industry is highly regulated, there aren't regulation processes that the equipment or the technology we build has to go through. Of course, everything that we put in facilities does need to be food safe, food grade, that can be sanitized. So we don't have those like regulatory burdens in terms of being able to commercialize our products.
Thank you for that. So, Jordyn, do you believe that you have faced any setbacks as a woman in the agriculture field, especially in digital agriculture, as well as from the entrepreneur standpoint? Excuse me.
Yeah, well, it's no secret that agriculture is a male-dominated field, as is engineering. So there are certainly times where I am the sole woman in the room, or not, or one of few at conferences. But I don't see that as a setback. I don't know that I've necessarily felt like because I'm a woman in this space, that's hindered me at all. I guess my strategies have always been to seek mentors who can help guide me through in my career and in decision making and through various situations, both men and women as well, who've been great. So I've been very fortunate to have those mentors that I've been able to reach out to, even if that is outside of my organization. I think that's been one thing that's been important to me. And as I mentioned before, being a mom to two young girls, I think it's just so critical for women to even if you don't see a lot of fellow females in your organization or in your room to still speak up, pursue what you want to do, and chase after those dreams, even if you don't see others doing it. It's, if you need a cheerleader, call me, because I'm happy to do that. I think it's so critical and important to really lift up other women entrepreneurs who are chasing after their dreams, because it's incredible. They're so important to our communities, to our organizations. So keep after it, and it's absolutely worth it. Even if you might be the only woman in the room from time to time.
This is the perfect chance for me to get a little plug in here. The Nebraska Women in Agriculture is hosting the Nebraska Women in Ag Conference here at the end of February. So if you're not registered for that, please do that. I'll talk about it more when we're done here, but just a quick plug, if you don't want to be the only woman in the room and be surrounded by many other amazing women in ag, that would be the place for you. Jordyn, is there anything that we didn't ask or talk about that you want to share before we wrap this up?
Fantastic questions. I think, yeah, just the main thing is appreciate the invitation. If you want to learn more about Marble, please connect with me. LinkedIn is probably the best way to do that. You can also visit our website. It's seemarble.com. But again, we wouldn't be where we are today without, we are so fortunate to have incredible mentors and advisors to our team. And it's through conversations with really all stakeholders in the meat industry is how we've made so much progress. And so we mean it when we say that we want to talk to folks and listen to understand challenges and problems. So if this is something that you want to connect on, please reach out. Would love to visit with you. So I guess that would just be my final thought is to stay plugged into the Marble journey. Would love to connect with you and have a coffee.
Awesome. So I think you mentioned it, but I'm just going to have you say it again just for in case someone missed it. Where can our listeners go to learn more if they're interested in Marble, in what you're doing, or if they have more questions that come up after we end this?
Yeah, so our website is seemarble, marble.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can follow Marble on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. And we are bringing a bit of FarmBits tradition to this Open for Business episode. We always ask for a piece of advice from our guest. And today we kind of want to know, Jordyn, what do you have for farmers or entrepreneurs like yourself, especially our female entrepreneurs that might be listening and don't really know where to start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say do not be afraid to ask. Ask for an introduction, ask for some time to chat. I think you will be surprised at how generous others can be in terms of sharing their knowledge or their network with you. So if there's something you're interested in, just ask. I think it can be scary at first, but over time it gets easier. And I think that's really what will unlock a lot of doors. The other piece of advice I would say is, when building a company or your team is really look for people with complementary skill sets as you. And that oftentimes means folks that have different strengths than your own. That's been a huge advantage to our team at Marble, especially in the early startup phases, is having people that are very gifted and skilled in different areas. So those I think are important components for entrepreneurs, but certainly, and I guess the last thought I'll leave with is make sure that you take care of yourself too, and surround yourself with a community of people that can support you as a person and as you go through the entrepreneurial journey. So it's certainly not for the faint of heart. It can be a roller coaster at times. So making sure that you've got that network and community of people who can lift you up, I think, is so critical. And I would not be where I am today without my community of support, both my friends and family and all the people that have been part of making building Marble to what it is today, but who have also been instrumental in my life and guiding me to really chase after my dream of being an entrepreneur. So I guess that would be my 3 pieces of advice and wisdom.
Thank you so much for that advice, Jordyn, and thank you for joining us and everyone.
I mentioned it quickly before, but if you have not already, make sure to register for the 2022 Nebraska Women in Ag Conference. This year's conference is going to be February 24th and 25th at the Holiday Inn Convention Center in Kearney. So it's coming up quick. We hope to see everyone there. More information can be found on our website, wia.unl.edu.
This one and previous episodes of FarmBits can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. FarmBits episodes are released every Thursday.
Make sure to follow both the Nebraska Women in Agriculture and FarmBits on all social media to find out who our next guest is going to be. We'll see you 1 month from today for our 2nd episode in the Open for Business FarmBits collaboration. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Jordyn Bader of Marble Technology. English just goes away when I click record, I swear.
That's me. It's really cool to see a Nebraska woman in ag start such an innovative and useful ag technology business. My favorite part was when Jordyn was describing her business startup plan and how Marble Technologies came about and where it is today.
That was really cool, but my favorite part has to be hearing the story of a true husker and a woman in ag and how she's so involved in the digital ag space. That's not something we see a lot of, I don't think.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to join us on March 8th live for our 2nd collaboration episode released through FarmBits on March 17th.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the FarmBits podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts to be informed about the latest content each week.
We welcome your feedback, so if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email, on Twitter, or in the reviews section of your favorite podcast platform. Our contact information can be found in the show notes.
We would like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support of this podcast and their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
The opinions expressed by the hosts and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views of Nebraska Extension or the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of FarmBits.